Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up on the warning map here, we've got a dense smoke advisory out for the Tanana area, the central interior, for visibility is occasionally reduced to a mile or less in dense smoke. That's out for tonight and through most of the day tomorrow. Visibilities Tanana earlier today are down to half a mile in smoke. And then the red shaded areas here, that's for extreme fire danger that's forecast to kick in the case of the Alaska Range passes. Look for winds tomorrow to gust to 45 miles an hour with the relative humidities down to as low as 25%. So that'll create extreme fire dangers in that area. And in the case of the Copper River Basin, south winds 25 gusting 35 miles an hour, especially along the Copper River. And humidities there also dropping to 25% with high temperatures forecast there. Copper Center, Glen Ellen up around 80 degrees tomorrow. Otherwise, fire danger today, you can see quite an area of extreme fire danger has emerged here over the north central interior from the eastern Kobuk Valley across the northern Koyukuk into the upper Yukon Valley there, and then some scattered areas down to the south. Also extreme fire danger over the east central or eastern Copper River Basin area. Today with high fire danger extending back to the west into the Madanuska, Susitna Valley, Eagle River Valley, and down into the western Kenai Peninsula. On satellite here, a lot of clouds. This is the front that came up yesterday, shifted up into the interior with a few isolated showers today, but mostly just clouds with that, and really weakening here this afternoon, hardly even moving very much with some clearing behind it, clearing skies over the Copper River Basin. It's good sunshine here over Cook Inlet and the northern Cook Inlet area, Kenai Peninsula, but this mid and high level cloud band shifting in this afternoon. Another sunny day here along the southeast coast. The temperatures rising into the 70s, in some cases lower 80s down there. And then this is the storm system that brought the gale force winds and heavy rain to the Alaska Peninsula. Also had gale force winds over Bristol Bay and a good portion of the southeast Bering today, with winds gusting as high as 50 miles an hour at Cold Bay and 45 miles an hour at Pilot Point. Rainfall amounts were quite significant here along the Kenai Peninsula, with False Pass getting just under half an inch of rain. King Cove had about 1 3/4 inches, and Chignik had over 2.5 inches of rain in the last 24 hours, and at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Just the perfect spot there. Amounts are far less up over Bristol Bay and across the Kuskokwim Delta area, but Kodiak did pick up about 4/10 of an inch of rain with that system. Some of that left over from yesterday, and then the rain that spread up there during the day today. On the chart, there's the front earlier today, crisscrossing the Alaska Peninsula. Winds diminished a little bit there and then picked back up with the main low center and that tighter gradient as you got on closer to the low. Some rain spreading up to Kodiak Island and northwestward over to the Pribilofs. Showers behind with a lot of clouds out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. And then this weakening trough here through the central interior. What that did do was, as this advanced northward, the wind flow became more southeasterly, and that pulled the smoke back to the west across the Kobuk Valley, into the Noatak Valley, and right out to the coastline there. Ambler had a visibility this afternoon down to about a mile. And of course, the heaviest smoke in over the central interior around Tanana, and that drifted into the middle Tanana Valley as well during the day today, reducing visibilities at Fairbanks. And the forecast for tonight, this front advances northward, so periods of rain here for Kodiak Island, gusty winds, and rain pushing into the southwest interior across Bristol Bay. Look for a band of rain across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area. Some of that could slip up the west side of Cook Inlet there on the eastern slopes of the mountains. Otherwise fair, just variable high and mid-level clouds here over the interior and mild overnight low temperatures. Mostly clear again this evening and overnight tonight up along the Arctic coast and the North Slope. And really not much change here for the Panhandle, just some variable cloudiness, mostly clear skies. Light winds, a little brisk there in the south coast, but out to the west, big area low pressure here in the south central Bering Sea. So showers, a pretty good bet here from the Alaska Peninsula all the way out to Shimia and Attu. And that doesn't change too much. That low center stays parked out there, a trough rotating around that. Probably will produce some moderate showers. And that'll pivot on through the Fox Island areas and eventually the Pribilofs tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon. Otherwise, scattered showers to the Alaska Peninsula. That front stalled out here. The rain should advance northeastward into southern Cook Inlet and the southern Kenai Peninsula, maybe into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, and then extend back in the form of areas of light rain or showers here across the Yukon Delta, lower Yukon Valley areas, and increasing chances of rain for the southwestern Seward Peninsula area, definitely for St. Lawrence Island, and then just clouds, areas of smoke over the interior. Highs tomorrow into the 80s in the clearest areas, highs getting into the upper 80s, and again near 80 here over the Copper River Basin, and another mostly sunny day here for the southeast coast, temperatures in the 60s, 70s, and possibly lower 80s once again. And for Tuesday, that front weakens as it moves inland, but pretty good area of moisture pushing northward there across the Koyukuk and Kobuk Valley areas up to the Brooks Range, and possible thunderstorms along the Brooks Range here down into the upper Yukon Valley, and then also a chance of thunderstorms here over the eastern Alaska Range, the upper Tanana Valley, and possibly even over the Talkeetna Mountains with showers over the Kenai Peninsula. Showery along the North Gulf Coast with the remnants of that frontal system. I dashed in as a trough there. Another dry day with partly to mostly sunny skies for the Panhandle. High pressure holding just off the coast there, but back to the west, kind of unsettled and showery here. Really no area high pressure building in behind this system. So showers extend and actually increase here as you get back out toward that main low center, out toward Shimia and Attu. That's when the winds will be strongest. Looks like southwesterlies at about 30 knots out there. Lighter winds here across the eastern Aleutians and into the Alaska Peninsula. Temperatures this afternoon along the Panhandle again range from 59 at Elfin Cove to 83 at Annette Island this afternoon. Otherwise, Juneau had 75 and Kawak at 71. Ketchikan had 76 degrees and Stewart came in with 86. 67 at Yakutat, upper 60s along the North Gulf Coast, both Cordova and Valdez at 68. Same thing at Kenai, 72 at Palmer, but Anchorage up to 76 this afternoon. That also matched over at Gulkana and nearly at Northway, otherwise mid-70s through the Tanana Valley there with the areas of smoke, and 83 at Eagle, 80 today at Bettles with 77 at Fort Yukon, 75 at Anatuvik. Up along the Arctic coast, quite mild temperatures there where the offshore flow was blowing, 73 at Wainwright and up to 75 today at Point Lay. Barrow at 63 and Nuiqsut at 68. Upper 60s here over the northwest and the Kotzebue Sound area, 60s for the Seward Peninsula on the south coast, some areas probably in the 70s over the central peninsula there, with mid-70s here all the way down to McGrath and actually Bethel up to 73 today. And pretty gusty east winds here drove the temperature up to 67 at Kipnuk, 68 at Togiak. East winds at about 25 to 35 miles an hour blowing across northern Bristol Bay. Again, those gusts approaching 50 miles an hour at Cold Bay. Otherwise, 50 there at St. Paul and St. George, and upper 40s to lower 50s along the Aleutians. On Alaska, up to 54. Lows tonight, pretty mild here through the west central interior, 50s to lower 60s. Otherwise, upper 40s to upper 50s here over the east central interior, with mostly in the 50s over south central Alaska. And even the Copper River Basin, upper 40s to mid 50s for the Panhandle, even warmer down to the south, and 40s out over the Aleutians. And for highs tomorrow, again, well into the 80s here through the Tanana Valley. If the smoke doesn't get in the way, Fairbanks may push up to 87 tomorrow. 84 forecast both for Fort Yukon and Bettles, with 85 the forecast high for Ambler, and even 82 out at Noatak. And temperatures on the north slope pretty warm as well into the 70s and lower 80s, but cooler 60s along the coast, and Kaktovik forecast high of 52. 60s here over the southwest interior where that frontal boundary, clouds and rain push in, but still rising into the mid-60s in some locations down there. 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. And again, a lot of locations well into the 70s across the southeast coast and 40s for the Aleutians. Flying weather, look for IFR, mainly western Prince William Sound down the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula area, and then cutting across the Barren Islands and then up the west side of Cook Inlet, a fair distance there, with marginal VFR working a little farther to the north. Marginal VFR forecasted across much of the southwest interior, and IFR along the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, and then big area IFR out here over the Bering Sea. And taking a look at passes, Anatuvik, VFR, no change for Adigan, staying VFR along the eastern Brooks Range. And for the western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, but the west entrance is staying VFR. Rainy VFR, lower conditions on the eastern entrance, which should stay VFR throughout the day tomorrow. And windy VFR, both north and south entrance for Windy, Isabel, and Mentasta. All forecast to be VFR again, and Tanita, VFR conditions again, maybe possibly lower here in the eastern entrance, but should stay above marginal. Portage, though, looks like it'll be IFR in the eastern entrance, and then through the pass to the west side, marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White, another VFR day. And for the freezing levels here, again, 12,000 feet from the Panhandle, right up into the central interior there, and that's supporting those highs. It'll push well into the 80s over the central interior in the Tanana Valley. And otherwise cooler conditions here, that frontal boundary right about just west of Kodiak Island, so the cooler air aloft back to the west and southwest there across the Alaska Peninsula down to about 6,000 feet. Icing threats, could be some areas of light to isolated moderate rime or mixed icing here in the yellow shaded areas, and then some embedded areas of even occasional widespread moderate rime icing here, mostly above 10,000 feet where freezing level is, and that'd be across southern Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet down to Fognac Island, and then some additional areas of icing possible here over the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern Aleutians, and the Pribilofs. Looking at the winds aloft, that jet here about 70 to 90 knots right across the southeast and southwest interior from the southeast. So eventually that's going to hold the front back a little bit, but the whole pattern shifting to the east and northeast. So that front and the moisture will eventually work in tomorrow night and on Tuesday, right, into the west central interior. And at 9,000 feet, southerly winds 20 to 35 knots here across Kodiak Island, up to 30 knots over the western Alaska Range, and pretty brisk winds back into the southeast Bering Sea again tomorrow, much lighter and more southerly over the eastern interior, and the Arctic coast pretty light, but easterlies on the east side to southerlies on the west side, but only at about 15 knots, and a broad swath of westerlies here out over the Aleutians running about 25 to 30 knots. That same pattern also seen at 3,000 feet. Those westerly winds there. South winds here up to 35 knots, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, in across Kamishak Bay, and across the southern Alaska Range there with lighter winds up over the eastern interior. Possibility of some light to isolated moderate chop across the Barren Islands and into the western Alaska Range, but the heavier turbulence will be the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, up across the eastern Bering Sea, just clipping Nunivak Island and then bending back south of St. Lawrence Island. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. Flooding can occur in Alaska any time of the year. Whether it's because of heavy rainfall or high volumes of snowmelt, flooding can pose a threat to life and property for Alaskans. But there's another cause of flooding during the springtime that's of great concern to people who live along Alaskan rivers. The cause of the flooding is breakup ice jams. Today I'll be talking with John Madden, who is the Director of the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for Alaska, and he'll be telling us about their program called River Watch and how that program can help prepare communities during the river breakup season. Welcome back, John.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's our pleasure to have you back in. We want to talk about the River Watch program. I understand it's been around for quite some time, over 30 years, so tell us a little bit about the program.
The River Watch is what Alaskans do best. It's Alaskans helping Alaskans. It's a partnership formal between the National Weather Service and the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. There's a third party of the communities who do live along the rivers. We want to understand what's going on, see it happening, so that we can immediately convert the science and the observation into courses of action by the community. It's the best kind of partnership because you go straight from seeing something to doing something.
Well, that leads into my next question. Why is the partnership between the National Weather Service and your division so important to the Riverwatch program?
The National Weather Service has been one of the best supporters that we have amongst the federal family of agencies. It works with us because it can take observations, run it through very elaborate modeling, and make predictions of what's likely to happen. You match up that science along with my divisions, the state division, of how do we convert those predictions into actions. So we have science leading to emergency management and courses of action, leading to the community who must take the immediate actions.
Now, has technology made it easier to predict which rivers will flood?
Well, Alaska has 3,000 rivers, so technology won't help us look at all of them. But the technology like the satellite imagery, the computer modeling, the observations, the communications has increased the accuracy, but those are predictions. What we try to do with River Watch is to fly the rivers with humans. A Weather Service hydrologist or a meteorologist and a Homeland Security and Emergency Management operations specialist. What's happening right now? The technology has helped us focus in on which are the rivers that are likely to present problems to the communities.
So you have both observations on the ground and then you have the flyovers, and both of those combined are giving you more information on what the rivers are doing.
Yes, and in that flyover, we also have that third member of our partnership, the community. The community understands the river far better than anyone who doesn't live there. The nuances, the curves, the turns, the tides, in lower rivers, but also if a condition is leading to something, the local community can partner with the other people in the plain, decide that a course of action is necessary, and then communicate in that community's language directly by radio, saying this is what we see, execute the plan that we've made.
So you mentioned one thing that the community is involved with the Riverwatch program. What other ways can the communities help out in the Riverwatch program?
As with many emergencies or hazards that face Alaska, the role of the community is to prepare for that eventuality, be it earthquake or tsunami or river ice jams. Prepare. Know where your shelter is. Know where the power generation is. Where is the high ground? What's your pathway to high ground? Make sure that all of the members of the community are informed and educated and tested so that when that happens, these floods happen very fast, but when it happens, the community knows what they will do and they can pick the right course of action for that circumstance.
I was online today and I found a guide that I believe it's titled the 2008 Spring Flood Breakup Guide. And it has a whole bunch of information on how communities can prepare themselves. There was contact information. There was some stuff on how the Weather Service is involved with all this. I would imagine you would recommend people going to that guide and really looking at that if they really want to develop a plan for their community.
That guide is very important for the community and the families and individuals. It has guidance for all of them. But it all comes into things happen fast, and the time to think about what you're going to do is before the ice breaks up, before the floods come in. So that preparedness is in that spring guide. It's the counterpart to what we publish in the fall for the coastal communities of the Fall Sea Storm Guide. We issue this out weeks and sometimes months before the season to give the communities that opportunity to go through their drill. Not every river floods every year. Therefore, not every community gets that practice every year. So it can be a few years in between these flood episodes. We don't want people to think that what it was last year means it's what it will be this year. That planning and preparedness and practice is very important for the community to be ready for whatever can come up.
And how is that going with the communities in Alaska? You getting a lot of feedback? Are people really taking this seriously? Numbers, I don't know how many communities are actually have a plan and a disaster plan if this
The
occurs.
river communities have been strong supporters of this. Every time we prepare for this, we include the communities in on the estimates of how this is going to come about, their observations of what's happening, their observations on how it is similar or dissimilar to previous years. All of that feeds back into the state and to the Weather Service to help us refine this. Every community listens very closely because these communities living right at the edge of the river, their airstrips are usually on the flat land next to the river. Some of their houses are right on the banks. They're very attuned to it, but they cannot make all those observations hundreds of miles upstream. We cooperate with the Canadians as the headwaters of the Yukon break up. That helps us look at the Fort Yukon, Beaver, that area. The Kuskokwim starts breaking up, and looking at what it's doing 100 miles away helps us prepare for 100 miles downstream. They can't do that by themselves, so through this partnership, we all benefit.
Great. There's more information I think people can go to on the internet. There's a couple websites. I believe that's linked from your main Homeland Security website. Correct me if I'm wrong here, John. There's one that's www.ready.alaska.gov.
That's our portal into the full range of hazards facing the state, one of which at this time of year is the river breakup.
Okay, and then the other one is www.flood.alaska.gov. Is that also part of?
It's a newly emerging one which will be a specialty for all of the hazards for floods, both the coastal and the river. So we'll have current information, we'll have links to the Weather Service, other means by which you can report observations. It's a new approach for this year, but we think it's going to be very beneficial for the communities.
Outstanding. And there's another website too, the National Weather Service's River Forecast Center's web page, which is aprfc.arh.noaa.gov. That's another website you might want to bookmark. Thanks, John, for coming in today and talking to us about the River Watch program.
It's always a pleasure, Jim.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Welcome back. Well, small craft advisories here along the south coast here in the outside waters. Otherwise, westerlies 15 to 20 knots up to the north, with the inside channels, northern Lynn Canal southerly at about 20 knots, and Clarence Strait northwest 20 with seas 4 feet. That doesn't change much into Tuesday. Still northwesterlies at 20 knots here in the south, and becoming northwest there for Stevens Passage is about 15 knots, and then looks like small craft advisories, southerly winds there for northern Lynn Canal increasing to 25 knots with 5-foot seas. Lighter winds now along the south coast, but still 20 knots out of the northwest. For Prince William Sound, light variable winds 10 knots or less, seas at 2 feet. For the North Gulf Coast, southerlies at about 15. East to southeast winds, small craft advisories here for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. For east to southeast winds up to 25 to 30 knots, otherwise northeast 10 to 15 for Cook Inlet. And then on Tuesday, southwest breeze there for northern Cook Inlet, and southerlies at about 10 there south of the Forelands. Otherwise pretty light winds now, southerlies for the North Gulf Coast at 15, southeast on the light side there for Prince William Sound at about 15 knots. Basically south or southwesterly winds 10 to 15 knots here from the western Gulf Coast down across Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. For Bristol Bay tomorrow, southeast at about 15 knots with south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, so down considerably from what was seen today in this area, with southerlies at about 20 knots as you approach Kodiak Island. And then southwesterly winds from Sitkinak here all the way down along the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula at 15 knots, southeast 15 for Bristol Bay, and southerlies at 15 for the peninsula. And for the Aleutians, small craft advisories here in the western Aleutians for west winds at 25 tomorrow, otherwise west to southwest into the central Aleutians, and the Fox Islands south to southwest at 25 knots. And then for Tuesday, small craft advisories again, pretty good low center back to the northwest here. So west to southwest winds at about 30 knots across the western Aleutians, taking more of a south to southwest turn here at about 25 knots. The small craft advisories for the central Aleutians, and then south to southwest winds at about 20 knots here across the eastern marine zones. And for the southwest coast and St. Lawrence Island, all southeast 25 knots tomorrow, seas running 5 to 7 feet. Seas up to 12 feet here with easterlies at 30 knots across the northern Bering Sea. and also pretty brisk there for the Pribilof, southeast at 30 knots with 13-foot seas. And then for Tuesday, much lighter on the winds, more southerly, seas dropping off to about 7 feet. South winds 20 knots south of Nunivak Island, southeasterlies 20 to 25 knots of the northern Bering Sea and St. Lawrence Island, those seas running 6 to 10 feet. And for the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow, easterly winds 15 to 20 knots, strongest over toward demarcation point. Otherwise, southeast 15 knots for the central and western Arctic coast, and from Wales all the way up to Cape Beaufort, look for easterlies at about 15 with seas running at about 3 feet. And the outlook for Tuesday, brisk wind advisories here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline up to 25 knots out of the east, and the central coast about 20 knots, same direction. Then back into the small craft advisories here for the western Arctic coast, easterly winds at 25 knots, but southwest at 20 knots there from Wales to Cape Lisburne. And then for tonight, this front pushes a band of rain into the southwest interior, stays wet over Kodiak Island, and then more showery, but still pretty windy here along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and up into the Pribilof Islands there with numerous showers and gusty south to southeast winds, but fair over the interior. And tomorrow, no change over the Panhandle, another mostly sunny day there with warm temperatures. Hot over the interior, some areas mid to upper 80s for the highs in the Tanana Valley. Rain for Kodiak Island spreading northeastward gradually across the Kenai Peninsula and up toward the Seward Peninsula. And then this whole system will push northeastward across south central Alaska tomorrow evening and overnight tomorrow night, moving to a position about like this, but really weakening. Scattered thunderstorms possible, eastern Alaska range, maybe the Talkeetnas, as well as up over the Brooks Range with some rain possibly over the Koyukuk and Kobuk valleys back out to the northwest coast. That's a look at the weather for tonight. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.